I'm Lucy.
And I'm Nicholas, and Edward will hopefully be joining us at some point in the future. Who knows?
Today we're talking about the Christmas invasion.
We're officially out of Eccleston territory. Trying to watch to see just how much of a dramatic shift we have once Tennant shows up. I will see how wrong or right I am about this, but I feel is kind of like Eccleston plus, trying to cop the general feel we had with Eccleston, even though he's not around anymore. No, this is the David Tennant show now.
Even though it is like David Tennant's show now, I don't feel like there's that big of a dramatic change in the show. It feels basically the same to me. Like 12 and 11, it felt like a real big change overall, but this kind of feels the same to me.
But I suppose before we get into that, we might as well go into the overall thoughts on this episode. Do you want to go first?
I'm not wild about it. I probably my least favorite introduction episode. Towards the end with the Doctor is kind of bad. It gave me a bad first impression of the 10th Doctor.
I am sort of the opposite. I really did not enjoy this episode until he showed up. Like, I really didn't like most of it until the end when we've got 10.
I didn't really like any of it.
It's sort of obnoxious, but at the same time, like, I don't know, it's the 10th Doctor having fun and being a goofball.
This wasn't the first 10th Doctor episode I saw, but I can imagine if this was the first one I saw, the stuff at the very end kind of gave me a bad impression.
Well, I mean, what specifically about it?
The aliens invading us, trying to kill 1/3 of the population. He acts like we shouldn't even be able to defend ourselves from this kind of threat.
Oh, yeah, the Harriet Jones
Yeah.
thing. I'm sort of on his side in this particular instance. Because the thing is, he doesn't protest them having that weapon around. I could see what you're saying if he was like, no, you guys shouldn't have the means to defend yourself. But when your enemy is retreating and you blow them out of the sky anyway, that's kind of a bad, no, don't do that. More about that later. Edward, opening thoughts.
I rather like this episode. I think it's a rather strong introduction for my favorite Doctor. That's my general thoughts. It's a good episode and one of the few good Christmas specials.
Oh, so you're like the opposite of us then, because for seemingly completely different reasons, neither Lucy or I really enjoyed this one all that much. And before we really get into the Harriet Jones thing, because we're gonna get to that eventually, that's like a big part of this episode.
I
think
know
we
who
should
she
start.
is.
Yeah, that running gag. Really see how it's funny, but this whatever. Humor is subjective. But the big thing that, of course, really turned this episode off for me is that we spend most of it with Rose, and she's just really insufferable. Like,
I don't like Rose in this one because I feel like it was so much backwards character development because like we were talking about in the finale last time about how she had that great moment, that great speech, and she kind of betrays everything what she says there. She's like, never give up and all this, and she basically just gives up in this episode. We can't do anything about the Doctor. There's no point in trying.
Well, there's really nothing that she can do. I mean, she can't pilot the TARDIS. Doctor's incapacitated.
yeah, but to be fair, I didn't even think about it on that level. Like, I sort of forgot, or well, I didn't forget, but I wasn't applying that speech to this episode. But I think she's right when you look at them side by side, because that was the last episode. That was the last time we saw this character. And that speech is like a real ideal affirming moment where it's like, no, I'm going to stand for what's right regardless of the odds, and that's just what I'm going to do now. And this episode, from her perspective, is what, like a couple of hours later, and she's so hopeless?
I understand to a point, like whatever it's saying, but it's like she just gives up after like 2 hours. It's really bad. I mean, like the Doctor can wake up or try to wake him up or try to figure something out. She was in a hopeless position before, just one episode ago, and now she's just, well, we're done.
And there are moments where she tries. I'll give her that, like when she's trying to be all Earth ambassador to the Sycorax and get them to leave.
Oh my.
Really undermined by how, like, cringeworthy and pathetic that moment is. I don't hold Rose to a very high standards point in her character. She would put on a stronger front than that. I don't know.
I don't know. She's been very confident in the face of evil or aliens before and after this. So, I don't know.
I'm trying to think about before this, though, because you could make the argument this is the first she's been in a situation like this without the doctor being a safety net for her. Makes her look really childish, and through most of the episode, I'm just like, God, stop whining.
But that's Rose. She's supposed to whine.
She's in a really horrible situation. Yeah, like, she loves the doctor, and he's commissioned, and frickin' aliens are making people about to commit suicide jump off a building. And yeah, that's a really dark situation, and that would create some despair in you. But is it the writing? Is it Billie Piper's performance that just makes her look like such a child?
I don't think it's so much her performance. I think it's just the writing. She just gets very whiny. I think she might have given up a little bit because she's depressed that she thinks the doctor is gone now since he changed. So that might have something to do with it.
You know what makes that less relatable is that she makes it all about her. She has all these lines where it's like the proper doctor, he'd wake up, he'd save us, and he left me.
That's what Rose always does. She always makes everything about her.
I'm literally shouting at my TV. Everything out of her mouth for the first 2/3 is a complaint or a lamentation of some kind.
Basically died for her, kind of. He took that energy so she wouldn't die, and now she's acting like he left her. And like, no, that's not exactly what happened there, Rose. He had to, or you would have died.
Meanwhile, there's no mention of Captain Jack.
Both think he's dead. I'm telling you, neither of them knows he's alive.
I probably believe Nicholas on that, because after Rose did come back from Bad Wolf Saga, I can't remember what happened.
All that we get is a throwaway line, Children in Need prequel, where the doctor says Jack is busy rebuilding the surface of the Earth.
I'm just gonna take your word for that because I don't remember that. But both of them do think he's dead. They would mention it to Mickey.
I think the problem with the whole Jack thing is, I think that was probably an afterthought for the children's special. I'm not sure when they filmed it. Did they film it the same day that they filmed David Tennant's first day? Actually, thinking about that line now, he's probably lying to Rose to make her feel better so she doesn't think Jack's dead.
I don't know. It's weird. I remember what my point was, though, about, like, Rose complaining about the doctor being gone. Her complaints would ring more true if he never... But no, we get, like, a whole extended sequence where he's awake and, like, explaining things to them like the same guy in that sequence. She knows he's alive. I don't know. This character's just really insufferable.
That pretty much sums it up right there.
It's weird because you'd think that 10's first be a proving ground for him, but it's not. Like, it's more of a proving ground for Rose. Like, can Rose hold her own episode where the doctor is just a bit player? And the answer is no. No, she can't.
There's a reason why it's called Doctor Who and not Rose Who.
I'm real glad we didn't end up getting that Rose spin-off, Rose Defender of Earth or whatever.
Earth Defense.
Run into this complaint when we reach Clara. Doctor Who, not Clara, who are Rose. And I'm like, yeah, but companions can, and I think should be the focus of some stories, if not like an arc, if they're strong enough characters to hold it. And this is especially true when we get to Clara, because she's a companion who I've seen get similar criticism to Rose in that regard, where, like, she takes over the show, or it's too much about her, and argue whether or not that's true, but I personally think at least she's a strong enough character, at least by series 8 and 9, that I'm fine watching an episode where she takes over screen time from the Doctor. Rose, I don't think ever reaches that point.
Clara's more developed. At first, she's very just there, but unlike Rose, she becomes better and more developed over time. But Rose is just kind of the same throughout, and she's like just a immature teenager from beginning to end.
Yeah, some people tend to criticize this episode of the Doctor not being active in the role enough, but I actually kind of like that he's stuck in a regeneration coma because it adds tension to like how Nerf would handle an invasion without the Doctor being there, to the point where the situation gets so desperate that you're just hoping for the Doctor to get up, and then when he gets up, he saves the day and it's glorious.
Yeah, I like that building of tension. I'm fine with this episode in theory. It's just I'd rather it happened with a companion who wasn't Rose.
Like Martha or Donna.
Or at the very least, to let Rose grow up from the experiences of last series.
Or
I
heck,
feel like the
even
way
have Captain Jack.
I feel like the way Rose handles this situation is how she would have handled it in the first few episodes of Series 1. Like, Lucy's right, she hasn't grown up, and it feels like we're supposed to get her to that place at the end of last episode. At the end of Parting of the Ways, I feel like she's supposed to have undergone an arc of some kind, but that gets really badly undermined here, I think.
Still just so irritatingly needy.
That's true about the needy part. The problem is all the character development that she got from the finale is not here.
At least Mickey is grown.
A little.
Yeah, you could argue character development has stuck for Mickey and even Jackie.
It's like a reset button almost. Like you could probably start the show here if you wanted to, if you didn't care about the Ninth Doctor.
Well, that's not really true because the episode following this is 2 of Series 1.
Yeah, there's Harriet Jones and all that stuff. And I guess we should talk about her, but first I want to talk about Ten, since he's, in theory, the main attraction here. What did we think about his antics with the Sycorax?
I think they're entertaining.
I like that part.
So funny, like, he keeps on saying he doesn't know who he is. The leader of the Sycorax is like, just tell me who you are!
I don't know!
I don't know!
That's the thing, I'm the doctor, but apart from that, I just don't know. I really have no idea who I am.
Like when he starts quoting The Lion King, and he's like, no, wait a minute. The 10th Doctor is not one of my favorites because I think that his characterization can be a bit all over the place. But like most of the actors, I think Tennant at least knows what type of performance he's giving right off the bat.
He knows what he wants his doctor to be right out the gate.
I mean, the writing doesn't always reflect that, but like the performance does. Yeah, I like him. During that whole part, he's really funny and likable. It's just stuff at the very, very, very end that makes him a little bit unlikable.
To amend my previous comment, he plays the comedy stuff and like the swashbuckling action hero stuff the same way that he will later. But the way that he plays the serious scenes in this episode, I think it's a different brand of serious than what we'll get from him later on. Like when he kills the Sycorax leader and when he talks to Harriet Jones, he's got a very quiet sort of drama to him. Like it's the way that Tennant would play like Hamlet or something.
Casanova, which is what he did before he got into Doctor Who.
Right. But then in later episodes, when we get to like serious moments with 10, it'll be a very over-the-top, super intense brand of serious that doesn't quite gel with this episode. There are parts of his performance that I suppose will change over time, but for the most part, he like knows what he wants this character to be. And I really wish we'd have kept in that scene that, I don't know, maybe the DVD versions keep it in where he tries to say fantastic but can't because of the new teeth. And then that's what we pay off at the end when he says it's going to be fantastic.
I mean, we don't get a lot of time with him, but he does definitely make his imprint in that one scene, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah. Like, it's hard to say this with certainty since, like you, this isn't the first Tennant episode that I watched, but if it was, I like to imagine that I know what type of show this is going to be now with him as the lead, just based on this few minutes.
He seems very comfortable in the role also.
Yeah. That's something that I've been mostly true of every Doctor. I think that maybe McCoy and Capaldi are the only ones who take an episode or more to really find their version of the character, but I don't know.
Well,
Maybe.
with McCoy, it took an entire season.
Well, since we're on the drama stuff with 10, we might as well finally go in depth with Harriet Jones and how, like I suspected, she's a completely different character here than she was in World War III and Invasion of London.
She's more confident and has a more commanding presence than from before, where she was a bit rambly.
Yeah, I suppose we're just supposed to infer that getting the job made her that way, but I don't know, it's kind of jarring marathoning all these. She was almost a comic relief character, and now she's definitely not that.
Yeah, she's completely serious now. I'm kind of okay with that, considering what's happening in the story. be kind of weird if she was really goofy and funny, and 1/3 of the population is about to die.
Yeah.
I say almost comic relief because she's not goofy. She's not like Mickey running into a thing and falling over like Wile E. Coyote or getting his legs stuck in a wash bucket. She's not that brand of humor. She's a very British, very understated, language-based brand of humor. You're right that it wouldn't have been appropriate to have that in this episode, but I almost have to wonder, because this is the last time that we're going to see her for a while. We'll talk about this in a minute, the implications of the Doctor doing what he did. But I almost have to wonder if going into Season 2 or Series 2, they're like, wow, we kind of wrote ourselves into a corner last series where we said that this lady was going to be Prime Minister. Now we have to have her be Prime Minister in this series, and that might distance us from reality too much if we're going to keep visiting modern-day London, so we have to get her out of the Prime Minister position as soon as possible. So with just one episode of her in the Prime Minister role, we then get her out of it.
And the Doctor, in a way, kind of inadvertently starts a Prime Minister curse, because throughout RTD Doctor Who and Torchwood, we go through like 3 Prime Ministers.
You're right.
Help the Master become Prime Minister. Good job.
And there's absolutely no way that we're thinking that far ahead to the Master being Prime Minister. I want to know how far in advance they had the idea that eventually we're going to bring the Master back and he's going to be Prime Minister of London, because we foreshadow that in Torchwood Season 1, which I think is in production around this time.
It's sort of.
So does RTD know this early that he's going to make the Master Prime Minister, and that's why he does this? Gets Harriet Jones out of the way?
Like, the rest of Teeth Davis years feel a little like he didn't really have a long-term plan for everything, just kind of making it as he goes.
Just plan stuff one series at a time.
Yeah.
Similar to how Joss Whedon handles his shows.
Because I'm thinking, like, it's entirely possible with the amount of time that passes in between, like the Harold Saxon stuff and Harriet Jones' first appearances, we could have just ignored her. We could have just had 9 have that line like, oh, that's Harriet Jones, she'll be Prime Minister one day, and it never happens. I don't think anyone would have batted an eye if that's where we went with it.
Or maybe have Harold Saxon appear and the Doctor be like, wait a minute, isn't Harriet Jones supposed to be Prime Minister?
It just feels like for whatever reason, whether it was to make way for the Saxon stuff or just to reflect London more, they were like, no, we can't actually have Harriet Jones be acting as Prime Minister. Let's just get her out of the way in her second ever appearance.
Yeah, I think it was more just trying to get rid of her.
But speaking of Harriet Jones, Edward, before you showed up, Lucy and I were having a bit of a disagreement regarding, like, which of them was in the right, because I'm saying I'm totally on the Doctor's side in this instance. Like, when your enemy is leaving, you don't blow them up behind their backs. That is...
Actually, Harriet Jones is in the right on this because of, like, this is not the first time aliens have invaded Earth, and it's certainly not going to be the last.
I mean, again, I said this, but it's like, the Doctor isn't telling them they can't have their own defense measures. He never says you guys shouldn't have that weapon. Like, he lets them keep it. The Sycorax, in particular, were leaving. Like, blow up the next aliens that show up and won't be reasoned with. But if they're retreating, let them retreat.
The Sycorax tries to stab the Doctor from behind and violate the rules of combat.
I know I shouldn't go this route, since, yeah, this is a generic Doctor Who alien species, and whatever...
Not really that generic. I think they're a cool design.
I mean, just generic in the sense that, like, only one gets any personality and the rest of them are all just nameless, faceless goons.
Yeah.
But I don't really know if we can go so far to say that what he does is reflective of all of them. Like, just because he was a dirty coward who broke the rules doesn't mean that they wouldn't agree to, like, leave because they did.
They were willing to kill a third of the human population. They were all on board with it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they're good people. If this is a war and your enemy, like, formally retreats with your permission, then you don't blow them up back.
Unless you fight dirty.
I mean, I guess.
I think the problem is we kind of see them fight dirty the whole episode. They threaten innocent people that have nothing to do with anything. And then we have the guy that backstabs the Doctor. And then it's kind of like when Hillary Jones blows them up to show, hey, anybody messes with Earth, you better not do it.
Just like being argumentative.
This sort of ties in with something I forgot to mention, which is the no second chances line. The doctor, after he's about to get stabbed, he like
No
throws
success.
no second chances. That's the type of man I am. No, 10. That is the exact opposite of the type of man you are, even in this episode. Like, that line makes no sense, and it will continue to make even less sense.
Not really, because he keeps on giving many villains one chance to turn away, like the Empress of Ragnos and the Family of Blood. And then when they ignored him and wreaked havoc, he gave them hell.
Okay, yeah, those are exceptions, which is why I say his characterization jumps all over the place, because at certain moments it seems like he's too eager to give people too many chances, especially with the Master, and I get that's like for personal reasons.
Because they are lovers.
Even the Daleks at 1 or 2 points, like, we'll get to that, but I don't know, there are times when I'm like, no, 10, you are not a no second chances kind of guy, and if you are, not everyone who writes for you got that memo.
The second chance thing to me has always been kind of dumb.
If they're gonna get accused of hating 10, it's gonna be me, because unless this is exactly like Series 1, and his era turns out to be completely different than to what my memories reflect, I'm going to have a lot of complaints about him. Like, I will never dislike any version of this character. He's probably one of my favorite all-time fictional characters, but 10 is one of the weaker regenerations for me, just in terms of how he's written. Like, just don't give him that line. If you give him that line, you're like, all right, merciless, no second chances, that is the character that we're writing. And then you have to follow through on that, and I don't think we do as often as we should.
10 is a lot of people's all-time favorite, and I can see it just
Including
because of the performance. I really like him, but it's like kind of flip-flops, and some of his morals kind of screw him up in the end.
10 is probably the most human of the doctors, if that makes any sense. View him as the human doctor.
Because I think doctors like 5 or 12 can occasionally show more, or even 6 can occasionally show more of a emotional side. But 10 is very emotional, he's very empathetic. Sometimes that human quality just translates to inconsistency with him, and it bugs me. We just talk about the Sycorax, like, design-wise. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about them. Part of me thinks that their design is really creative, another part thinks it isn't.
And then a lot of people complain about 10th Doctor's costume being too formal.
Too formal? Are you sure you don't mean too casual? Because the too formal exist for this character?
I don't think there's any rules. I think people try to make up the rules for the Doctor, but he can kind of dress any way he wants.
Some people try to find ways to hate the 10th Doctor because they're agitated that he's pretty much the new Tom Baker.
I mean, if they're saying he looks too formal in comparison to 9, then yeah, but if anything, he's got one of the more casual Doctor outfits. It's just a pinstripe suit with a really nice coat. Normal people on the street can wear that and not look out of place too much.
Which is why I think that Doctor should have worn his tie as a bandana on his head, like in The Girl in the Fireplace.
Yeah, but like outfits that are formal enough to be like noticeable in a crowd is this character's MO a lot. 12 will sometimes wear a really fancy like velvet coat that I love and that I
And
own.
sometimes he'll just wear a generic hoodie.
Sometimes he'll just wear a hoodie. And I'm like, no, we're talking about Peter Capaldi now, but something about him is able to sort of pull it off. But it just feels wrong to have this character walk around in a t-shirt as a regular outfit.
I do find it's a bit more realistic that the Doctors, like, in real life, sometimes we fancy up and sometimes we're just slumming it. I do find that's kind of interesting with the Doctor we currently have, because all the other Doctors pretty much just, this is their costume. They are a cartoon. They only wear this one and only costume.
I get what you're saying in that, like, in cartoons, to save on animation, will often draw characters wearing the exact same outfit. I mean, Tennant has the brown suit and he has the blue suit. Like, Doctors like 7 and 4 would let their outfits evolve over time, so they're similar throughout their eras, but they do change. And Smith goes through a complete change to, like, super fancy.
In Maximus' first season, he has the tweed coat. In Series 6, he has this green trench coat. And then, halfway through Series 7, he wears this purple velvet outfit.
I guess before we get too hard into other Doctor stuff that we'll inevitably talk about anyway later, I don't know, like the way that Diamanda Hagen put it, and I don't agree with her about everything, but she did make a point that the Doctor in general should have an air of upperclassness to him. And I really think that is kind of a part of the character, regardless of what regeneration he's in, is that he feels like someone who's in a class above most people that he interacts with. In comparison to 9 is pretty much there. It feels like casual wear, but it feels like an upperclassman's casual wear.
Yeah, what Tennant does. 9 was extremely casual. I mean, there's really not even a costume. There's like a t-shirt and leather jacket.
Yeah, I mean, like, 9's outfit isn't contemporary at all, but it's easy to mistake it for that, just because it's so nondescript.
And then you got costumes like what the 8th Doctor and 6th Doctor wear.
I don't think 8 is nearly as silly as 6.
Oh god, that multicolored costume.
8's I actually quite like. Who'd have thought that the Christmas Invasion live stream is when we'd start addressing our in-depth opinions on costuming?
Because I distract. That's my job.
There's something about the way you like the design of the aliens.
Oh yeah, that's how we got on this whole thing. I like the moment when, like, Harriet Jones and everyone else comes onto the ship and they take the bone masks off and they're like, oh, it's a mask. And their face is still kind of bony and terrifying looking underneath it. Like, I just love that they have a mask that looks like it's a skull. And then they take that mask off and their face normally still looks kind of skull-like. And there's that weird line. They're translating their stuff out, like, in that military base or wherever they're at. And he's like, something, 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 Sycorax Rock.
At random unit base number 472.
Yeah, and we're translating the Sycorax, and it's like, Sycorax Rock, as in the modern sense, they rock. Okay, why is that line there? It's just confusing. It doesn't add anything.
I think you're trying to be funny.
But, like, we don't linger long enough for it to feel like a joke. Like, we brush past it immediately, so I'm like, what are we saying about species with that line, that their language has evolved to where, like, they have an Earth equivalent for that word? Why?
Because we're overthinking this.
But, I mean, Lucy's not wrong. Like, especially in the RTD era, I think will give aliens with no, like, connection to Earth or no experience on Earth lots of slangy Earth dialogue. But yeah, it's just a weird thing that we'll do sometimes, in this show in particular, where it's like, let's have these aliens say funny Earth phrases with no indication that they've ever been to Earth.
I think he's trying to copy Buffy a little bit because the characters, like the demons, we think they're going to be like evil and stuff, and sometimes they talk like normal human beings.
They have an excuse. If they weren't alive through, like, the progression of time and language, then they used to literally just be normal modern people who don't know any other way to speak. Sometimes in Doctor Who, we'll just have aliens say, like, oh, that's so cool, dude. I mean, that's not an actual line, but something to that effect. Where did you learn to say that? Why are you speaking like this? I'm overthinking this, though. Edward is right. I'm overthinking this.
It's my job to overthink stuff. Stop taking my job.
Mainly because I don't think I have much else to say about this episode. I have one little note here that's about Rose again, where it's like the Doctor being asleep and her leaning over and saying, help me, and that's what gets him to wake up. That's super cheesy.
I mean, you could just whisper exterminate. Just be mean.
We're going to talk about cheesy. What about the Christmas tree that tries to kill everybody in the living room?
That scene was awesome. That's all I have to say.
People get on that Christmas tree for being silly, and it is. Why?
They're self-aware of how silly it is. How pathetic is it I'm going to get killed by a Christmas tree?
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, I feel like that sort of thing would be more in place if this were an actual Christmas special and not just an episode that was set during and aired on Christmas.
People complain the RTD specials aren't Christmassy enough.
We'll have this with this one and the next one.
But the
Most of the RTD ones, yeah.
lazy.
Moffat, if nothing else, tries to make all of his Christmas specials about Christmas in some way. But yeah, RTD's episodes are just sort of average adventure episodes with Christmas trappings thrown on. And I can't help but think that for this episode, for upcoming episodes, maybe, like, we could use that time better. Like, all the time that we spend on the Christmas trapping stuff would be better if we just aired these during Christmas, but didn't force them into a Christmas setting. Because they really add nothing to the episode.
I kind of wish it would go back to it, just being, like, in the background and just kind of mentioned.
I mean, you have three options. You could either make an episode about Christmas, and call it a real Christmas special, you could have an episode where the Christmas stuff is firmly in the background. We don't let the Christmas stuff constitute plot points at all. It's just set on Christmas and we don't talk about it. Or you could just air a regular episode on Christmas and not waste any time on Christmas stuff if that's not the story you want to tell.
That's right, to Moffat's Christmas special say takes them too literally. Like Time Doctor where Trenzler, he defends a town called Christmas.
Yeah, like that felt like a stretch. But here we have what's setting a trend for RTD Christmas episodes, which is that we'll never actually have Christmas be important. We'll just throw Christmas-related things and spend a couple minutes on them, and that justifies this being a Christmas special. Why not just set this episode at some other time so that you don't feel like you have to shoehorn those things in?
I rather have it in the background most of the time.
And to be fair, the most recent Christmas special, was it even set during Christmas? I don't think it was.
In the beginning it was.
But I'd rather we handle it like that. Like, if you can't think of a Christmassy idea for your episode, just don't make it about Christmas. Even if it's going to be aired on Christmas, you don't have to make that holiday the setting. You don't have to make the, henchmen Santa carolers. You don't have to make, your one-scene physical threat a Christmas tree. It feels like RTD did those things because this episode was going to be aired on Christmas and he felt like it had to be that way. Not because he wanted to make a Christmas episode.
Yeah, I don't think he likes making Christmas specials. Now, thinking about them, most of them, like you said, they're just kind of in the background.
Go on for almost an hour, and yet it feels like we not say much about this episode. Is that just me? It feels like compared to our last few discussions, there's just not too much to this episode.
Basically talk about everything but the episode, almost.
It just feels kind of thin. We let ourselves get distracted to talking about costumes for 10 minutes.
That's RTD filler for you.
I mean, is this filler?
Most of Doctor Who's filler. The problem is most of this isn't very entertaining because we're stuck with a companion that nobody likes.
Neither of us like her for stupid reasons. She's the most popular New Who companion, which baffles me to this day.
It's just because she's the first one, right?
Yeah, that and the love story kind of stuff is another reason why people like her.
Yeah, people are a sucker for romance. I'd prefer the Doctor Who episodes be mostly standalone.
Like the classic series?
But even in the classic series and rewatching series 1, there is more character progression across episodes that I appreciate. Something that Mr. TARDIS will usually say is that Doctor Who needs to embrace long-form storytelling, and I really don't think it needs to in the sense of plot points carrying over from episode to episode. I like it when we can have characters naturally grow over the course of multiple episodes so you can chart how they change because of the events of particular episodes. And I'd like to hold out hope that this episode isn't filler because it's a stepping stone for Rose to improve? ? In the future,
She never improved, though.
maybe we'll find out that we were wrong the whole time on this viewing.
Rewatched a lot of Series 2 this weekend, and no.
We'll see what happens, but for right now, I think I've said all I could about this episode.
I gotta hide under the desk now.
A little bit of final thoughts, I guess. Not a fan.
It's especially bad because I don't think I'm going to be a fan of the next several.
8 out of 10 for me.
8 out of 10, IGN.
Okay.
Next time we're doing New Earth.